Hello guys, my name is Michael and welcome to a new GObject tutorial. Like I said, if coming something new, I'm going to update our playlist with this information, and now it is time to do the same thing. For this, before we move to the next thing which I want to learn, I want to introduce something. Before I'm going to introduce you to something new, I want to show you something which you need to understand. And for this, we have the click a callback function, which we created in another video. And this function basically, once that the button gets clicked, because we did a connection between the label and the button, and the same thing we did for the grid with the button by setting some keys, some identifiers. Once that we click the button, this click a callback function will be called. It will be retrieve this information from the button with the help of those two keys. And because we have that information and we know that the label data holds a label and the grid data holds a grid, we basically decide at this point to remove and to add the label to inside our grid. And if you remember, for this, to make it work, we had to call the GObject ref and GObject unref, because if we don't call the GObject ref on our label before we call the GTK container, the label itself gets destroyed. And this happens because the label, once that we created, where it had only a floating reference, when we basically call the GTK container add, which was set from floating to 1, now the GTK container, when basically remove the label from the grid, it checks this reference because it's hold it and it sees that it's only set to 1, which is the reference which has it. Once that the reference it will be decreased, it will go to 0, and because it goes to 0, the object, it will be destroyed. So 0 means destroyed. Whatever. 0 means destroyed. Okay, so this is very important for you to understand, because those things are important. If you don't understand these things, then you will have a lot of problems. But I think you understand now. So this is the reason why we had to call the GObject ref to not destroy the object by it decrease it from 1 to 0, and we are holding a reference, increasing it to basically for 1 to 2, and at that point the GTK container drops the reference from 2 to 1, and being only for 2 to 1, the object doesn't get destroyed. Anyway, because we had to create so much information, and because we had to deal with so much information, we had basically to create a function like this. But I'm going to show you another way about how you can work with another function which is called GObject set data fall, which is basically the same function. If you call this function without the last parameter, and I'm going to show you. So 1, 2, I'm going to comment these two calls, and instead of the GObject set data, I'm going to work with GObject set data fall, and the last parameter I'm going to set it to null. And now if I'm running the program, you will see no difference. So it doesn't make any difference between calling GTK object set data or GObject set data fall. If we check the difference between them, the GObject set data needs an object, a key, and a pointer. The GObject set data fall needs an object, a key, and a data as well, but it also needs a fourth parameter, which is a function to call when the association is destroyed. So basically, once that this association is destroyed, like for example if you remove it, or if you destroy the object, if that data, it is a data which was created, let's say, on the heap dynamically, like when you're calling the malloc or gmalloc in our glib case, then to not have a memory leak, this function gives you the opportunity basically to destroy or to release that memory before you proceed with your application. So in this case, just to be sure that you understand what I'm going to do now, I'm going to remove all these things right here, and now I'm going to create an array, gchar array, and of course I'm going to call gmalloc 0, and I'm going to say 256 or whatever times size of array. And now, because we create this information, I'm going to call string copy, and I'm going to set to our destination, which is the array. We're going to put this is a long message. And now we are going to make some create something different. Here I'm going to pass the array, sorry, not inside the k, inside the label. The message, the k here will be a message, whatever, just this is just an identifier, a k, to make this connection to work. And of course the last thing which we need, it is the last parameter, which says it should be a function to call when the association is destroyed. So in our case, because we are working with a gchar array which was created on the heap, was allocated memory for it, at this point I'm going to pass the g free. Yes. Why? Well, let's see what's the story with the g destroy notify. If we call this function, I mean, if we search after this keyword, we'll see that it is a function. It is actually a g function pointer, which takes one parameter, which is the g pointer data, and specifies the type of the function which is called when a data element is destroyed. So it is passed to the pointer to the data element and should be free any memory and resource allocated for it, which is a good thing. Okay, so that being said, what exactly we are doing here? We are calling GObject set data fall. We are connecting the array with our button by making this by giving this key, this identifier, which is called message, and as the last parameter of the GObject set data fall, we are working with g-free. G-free basically it takes care, once that the object is destroyed, that frees the memory which was passed from our array itself. So basically this is everything which does at this point this function. Now if we click the button, we won't see nothing. Okay, we'll see we have no grid. Someone just told, yeah, because this is the information which I created right here if something goes wrong with our GObject get data, and it is because now we change it, we remove everything. We are going to come back to that story a little bit later. So now that you understand how it's working, of course the next thing which you can do, if you don't really care about malloc or you need something much more different, then you can of course call the g string dop right here, and you can duplicate your information which you have it, whatever, hello, or maybe the same string if you want to, like I'm doing here. It will be basically the same thing. We are connecting this information, which is in this case this string, with the button by identifying with k, call it message, and we are calling g-free on it, which means to free it once that is done. And of course the last thing which is very important for you, you will see in a moment where exactly do you need to call the g destroy notify, where you need to cast. So now if I'm casting this one, you will see no difference, because it will be like if it will be somehow at this point, if you do this, is the same like you have let's say char a, let's say a, and then you do char b, it's equal to a, and you are putting a char inside in the front of a, which is nonsense, because it is already a char, so it is nonsense to do it. The same thing basically applies here also. if you understand what I'm talking about. You don't need to cast the g3 to a gdestroy notify. Where you need to cast it, you will see in a moment. Okay, so that being said, let us move now with the next thing which I want to introduce you, and this will be very, very important for you to understand it, because now at this point I'm going to call the GObject set data again, and this time I'm going to call the set data again on the grid, and we are going to say on my grid, let's say label data, whatever, label data. And now watch the last two. I'm going to remove the last two parameters. The last two parameters will be now very interesting for you, but I think you will understand in a second. GObject ref label, yes, and the last one, it will be of course GObject on ref, which is a very important for you to understand. Now, as you can see, the first thing which I called now, I'm calling the GObject on ref without passing any information, because we don't need to pass the label here. We don't need it. Why? Well, because the last parameter, it already said it is a function which release the data from the data itself. The data, our data, in this case, it is the third parameter. So basically, when you call the fourth parameter, which is the GObject on ref, it will be applied on the third, which is the label in our case. Okay, so now because we did this, let us make some changes to our program, because we need to understand how this works. And for this, I'm going to work, let's see, yeah, because we had the grid, I'm going to make some changes here, which means just to be sure that you understand what exactly I'm trying to do here, I'm going to remove these two things right here, because we don't need them, and there will be some new changes to our program. So I'm going to say now, if grid is equal to null, and you know what, I'm going to GTK widget, because we need to retrieve the information, which is of course in our case our label. We need a label, and GObject get. There is no GObject get data file, guys. So just remember, there is only GObject set data file. But to get the information from the GObject set data or for GObject set data file, it is applying only one function, which is the GObject get data. This is the function which you need to call it all the time. Okay, now because we have it, what do we need now? Let's see. We need the information which we are passing it here, which are those two things right now, right here. So I'm going to copy this one, just to be sure that you understand what I'm doing. And now because we have the label, we can say and, or no, better say or label is equal to null. So if one of them is equal to null, just return, because we cannot work with something which we don't have, isn't it? And now because we have it, I'm going to comment this part right here for a second. I wanted to delete it, but I don't want to type so much information, so I'm going to copy it. And now we can create a static flag, static gboolean flag, set it to false, of course. And now I'm going to say if flag is equal to false, which is true. Now we can work with G container remove, and why not G print. We can say now something for the %s was removed, and of course which one, because we have GTK widget get name, we can work with this one, label. And if it's not true, which means it should be false, I'm going to copy the last call right here, which was the same. I'm going to drop the reference because we don't need it. Now I'm going to copy this one as well. Was added. So what exactly are we having here now? Because we took all the information we need, I'm going to delete this one. Now guys, watch. What do we have here? We have a clicker callback function. This clicker callback function takes two parameters. The first one is the button and the second is the grid. Because we have these two parameters, we are checking them against with the gReturn if fail, and then with the help of GObject get data, we are getting the data which we are setting in here with GObject set data fall, where we set to make a connection between the label and the grid, and the connection should be identified by the label data. And once that this connection is made, it makes also a reference to the label, which means its count now it increases to 1. And once that is done, when the object is destroyed at some point, it should call the GObject unref back to it to set it back or decrease it to 1. So because we did this, basically we are fine and safe to call GTK container remove right now, because now the label doesn't have the reference equal to 1. It has now the reference set to reference count set to 2, and GTK container remove, it will set it only to 1, and by doing this the object doesn't get destroyed. And because the object doesn't get destroyed, the next time when the button will be clicked, it will move from the flag false, it will drop to the else statement, and here we'll say grid attach, it will be attached to our label because our label wasn't destroyed, and it will be printed also the message the label was added. So let's see if it's working, so that we are 100% sure that we understand how it's working. So as you can see, I'm clicking to say the GTK label was removed, the GTK label was added, and you see we have it here, so basically works fine. So this is how exactly you are working with this function, and as you can see, with the help of this function, we could basically call the GObject reference. If you don't need something like this, then you are perfectly fine to work with GObject set data if you don't need a reference or something similar. Now I'm going to introduce you a last thing, which so that to be 100% that you understand exactly what I'm doing here, I'm going to introduce you to something else, some more information. And I hope that once that you see how it's working this one, basically you can understand better how the GObject set data full it's working. And for this I'm going to do something much interesting. I'm going to comment this one, and here I'm going to change the object to button again. Just, it's not important, but it's just to be sure that you understand that's working no matter which object. It is about the object as important information. So I'm going to set the label data to some message, and here I'm going to say G string dot, and I'm going to duplicate the message hello there. And now instead of GObject or G free like we are used to work here, I'm going to call a regular function. For this function I'm going to say free object, just to be 100% that you understand. Now let us create this function. This function which we are going to create, it will be a function G free object, which needs something, in this case an object, our data in this case it is a char, because once that we call this function, basically you know that it will be it will be stored into a pointer. So this is what we are doing right now. So I'm going to say gchar let's say message, so that everything works fine. Now let's define it. And now watch guys what I'm going to do here. I'm going to check first if the message it is not equal to null, or if message, whatever how you want to, which means we have something there. Then I'm going to say gprint the message is %s, and of course we need the message. And once that we're done with it, because it is not null, I'm going to say here else. You can say else else return, but we need to free the object, which is bad. So for this, we just call gFree message. Now, of course, gFree doesn't care about the message being null or nothing, because if it's if the message it is indeed a null, it will just check it and then just return null. So you're fine and safe to work with gFree on your message without checking it for or against null. Now you will see something interesting. We created a function which prints a message. Once that prints that message, that message basically its memory will be freed and released to your operating system. How we did that? Well, we call the GObject set data fall. We create a connection between this information and the button by using an identifier called message. Just to be sure that you understand, I just creating this connection between them, but I'm not using it. And I'm passing a function which takes basically this data, print it, and then release it. You see, I'm not calling the GObject get data. It's very important for you to understand. Now you will see something when I try to compile it. It says passing argument 4 of the GObject set data fall from incompatible port and type. It's not working. It is expecting. Okay, I kind of lost a little bit of information here. I hope I found it back. Build message and says expecting a gdestroy notify. You see, it is expecting this one. We didn't provide it. Why? Well, because in the first case the gFree does follow this rule, but the free object, our function which we just created, is just a void function. So which means that this function has to be casted to be to work with our free object. So in this case, what we need to do, we need to basically cast our function to gdestroy notify. That's it. So here is the part where I wanted to show you how the gdestroy notify works. Now I'm going to compile it and run it, and you'll see it works fine. Watch. You see everything works fine. Of course, we cannot remove here. You see nothing. Why? Well, because we don't actually work at this point. At this point, I want to show you the connection of these things, how it's happening, and where exactly happens. Like I told you, I'm going to close this one, because if I close here, you'll see something. I'm going to close the terminal, because I already told you, once that the object gets destroyed, in this case, for example, our button, this function will be called, and it will, once that it will be called, basically it will print the message and then it will free the message. But when exactly does this thing happen in this case? Well, in this case happens once that you destroy the button, or once that I'm going to close the window. Right now, watch, you see message hello there. You see the function was called. The function right here, the free object function was called and it was printed. And what's new? What different thing happens right now? Our object got free. We had no memory leak because we printed the message and then we released the memory, or better say, we gave it back to the operating system. This is a very important thing which you need to understand. So that's the reason why I'm showing you another way of working with this function. You see, I didn't call the GObject get data because I wasn't even interested in this part. I wanted to show you that the meaning of the GObject set data fall, how it is, and not only to work with the same and the same and the same again. And then maybe you will think at some point, okay, so I need null every function to call GObject get data. If I not do that, then the GObject set data or GObject set data fall has no meaning for me. So you see, it has a meaning, which means at this point we didn't need the GObject get data. We didn't got use of that function because we were interested only and only on the data itself. So we're working with this kind of data now, where we were printing the message, which we basically send it right here with the help of stringed up function. Well, as you can see, there are a lot of ways to work, and I think now that maybe it will be enough for you to understand how it's working and I hope that you understand, because it is very important for you. You know what? You know what? I'm going to show you something else, because why not? What the heck? I'm going to show you something much more different. Let's say you call the GObject setData full on the button again with a new, let's say a new identifier, a value like my value, and instead of the gstring dop right here, I'm going to do something which we didn't work until now, but I'm going to introduce you these things a little bit later. So I'm going basically to pointer, and let's say value, and here I'm going to call a function, call it use value. Oh. How about this? How do you think it works? This one. Let's say let us create this value. Let's say 10. Not much important, because important is that you understand. So I'm going to create a function. This function use value right here. Void use value G pointer. I'm going to do something much different. You see, here I was working with a gchar message because I knew exactly what I'm passing, so I didn't had to pass a G pointer data to cast it back and to retrieve information. You saw I was just working with gchar because I knew exactly what is there. But this time I'm going to work with G pointer data just to be sure that you 100% that just to be 100% that you understand. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to retrieve that information from the data. So for this I'm going to say again G unknown signal integer, call it value, which we are going to get it of course from our data. Now of course we cannot do this, isn't it? We cannot put the data inside the value because the data is a G pointer, which is a void pointer. For this we need to call the G pointer to int. So G pointer to int, and of course the data. What are we doing here? Here we are creating a value, and then we are passing the third argument of the setData full, not as the value, but we are converting the value to a pointer. So basically calling the unsigned integer to pointer, we are converting basically our unsigned integer value to a pointer. Once that we pass it here, we get it through a G pointer data because we have it. Now we call the G pointer to int to put now back the value from the data inside our integer. Once that we have it, now we can work with it. G print the value is %u because it's an unsigned integer, and the value, which is the value. Let me compile it and run it. And as you can see, it says conversion from real to int. So we kind of have a problem. Yes, because I said to int, we need to unsigned integer, not to an integer. Sorry guys, my bad. I called the wrong macro function. Now as you can see, nothing happened. Once that I close the button right now, you see it says the value is 10, which is true. Well, how do we know that the value is 10? Well, because we did pass it here. Right here, we create a value and we pass it right here. And now you see something interesting now. We didn't call a free function. We didn't create a function which is going to free our information. We didn't have to cast it to GDestroy notifiers. You see? Why is that? Well, because now we were working with different kind of data. And this different kind of data where it doesn't mean to destroy an object and to take care about the object itself. We are creating a function called void use value. On basically now we just convert an unsigned integer to a pointer, and then we put that pointer information back to an unsigned integer value, and then we are printing its content. This is the thing which we did. So now let's take a short brief what we did today. We saw how it's working the setData full when we call on an array which we created on the heap, if you call it dynamically, And then we saw that instead of that we can just call gstring.up, and it is basically almost the same thing. We saw that we don't need to cast it to gdestroy_notify because they are matching. We also saw that calling the GObject set data full on our grid, passing the GObject ref on ref, we basically create a shorter way of taking care about the reference counting of our label to do not get destroyed when we call gcontainer remove, where the object when the object set to 1 will be destroyed because we'll set to 0. And then we saw again that when you call the GObject set data, basically we can do some different things. For example, we can create our own destroy function, and in this case you saw we were working with a string, and because of that I didn't work with a gpointer data, I worked directly with a gchar message. We print the message and then we free it, and in the last part we are passing even a value, and then we converted the value to a pointer. We are passing another function as a kind of destroy function, but we don't need to destroy something here, and the use value basically converts back the gpointer to our unsigned integer and then gets printed, and that's it. I hope you understand, guys, because this is very important how these things are working. I see the connection fails. I hate this, but it happens for a time, wherever. Anyway, and I think now you got more information maybe that you probably thought that you get. I know that was a long video, but please check it again and again, and I'm 100% sure, which if you didn't catch it from the first time, once that you see the second time this video, you understand what's the story with this function GObject set data full, and you know now where exactly the difference is between the GObject set data and the GObject set data full. That being said, thank you guys for watching. If you like it, please subscribe, share with your friends and neighbors, and until next time, see you guys.